News engagement has taken a nosedive during the first half of 2022 compared to the first half of last year, and in some cases has fallen below pre-pandemic levels. Cable viewership across the three major cable news networks, CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, is down 19% on average in prime time for the first half of this year compared to the first half of 2021. There are some nuances between the networks, however. CNN and MSNBC were down 47% and 33% respectively, while Fox ratings were up 12% in that 6-month span. As Axios puts it, Americans have grown weary amid what feels like a never-ending cycle of bad news. Kim, do you think that it's right to blame the quality of the news for this, or is it something about the media institutions themselves, or both?
Well, it's probably both. And exhaustion, I'm sure, as well. I think people are also exhausted. Because we just really came out of some really intense news, right? So we had 2020 where we had this election and then COVID. And then we spent the entire year of, so that was 2019, right? So, or was that 2020? I don't remember my years. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's all a blur. I'm like, what year are we in? I mean, these last couple of years of the pandemic has just made everything like all blurry. But, we've had such intense news cycles that I think people are just checking out right now. We're finally getting a break, I feel like, from the news. Yes, we have the war in Ukraine. That's far away. People are concerned about inflation for sure, but what are they going to learn by turning on the news about inflation today, except it's, prices are still going up. And so people are like, yeah, I know that. I go to the gas station, I see it. I go to the grocery store, I see it. I don't need a newscaster to tell me that inflation is continuing to climb. So I think people are just fatigued out and they're stressed out and they're probably taking more work jobs, probably more Uber driving going on because people are needing to make ends meet. But yeah, and the quality, of course, I think people are clearly checking out, especially of CNN and MSNBC, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Kim, that you make about, why do you turn into the news? It's not to tell you what you already know about the struggles that you're facing in your life. I think people tune in with the hope that they will get some insight into what's being done about it. And I think if you have a kind of a do-nothing Congress and a president who's basically blamed Manchin and Sinema for a failure to enact much of his proposed legislation, the things that he ran on, then at a certain point it's like you're going to tune in just to be told nothing's happening again?
Right. Well, and that's probably one of the big issues with CNN and MSNBC. Besides, I mean, look, I used to watch them almost exclusively, and I would turn into Fox here and there. I now switch, and I watch Fox way more than I watch CNN or MSNBC, and I tune in to those other two just to. I see this. I swear to you, it's like a soap opera. You know how soap operas, where it's like you tune in and you haven't watched the soap opera for 10 years, but for some reason the storyline is still exactly the same. Somebody's captured by an alien and, it's like it's the same exact storyline. And I feel like every time I turn on CNN or MSNBC, they're talking about we're going to take Donald Trump to court. I mean, it's every time I turn it on. And it is annoying. It is. Then I just don't want to hear it anymore. I'm like, okay, I get it. You guys have been going after the guy since 2016. Still going to get him this time. This is the one. This is the big clincher. We finally get him. Yeah. And, whatever. I mean, they're becoming a soap opera. So yeah, I think people are just
fed up, tuned out. I get it. I certainly relate.
Well, and ready to live their lives finally. Like, right? We're finally let out of our cages. So everybody's like out traveling and doing things, and they just do not. And if they can afford it, even with inflation, I know airline flights are extremely expensive right now, but people are doing their best to enjoy their spring and their summer, finally getting some freedom, being able to get married. A lot of weddings were held off, a lot of reunions, a lot of gatherings, right? So people are just now living their life. So I think the dip is expected, but I also think it will come back. People will be tuning back in the fall.
Yeah, for midterms for sure. Well, new data from the Pew Research Center finds that while 76% of Americans surveyed say journalists should always strive to give all sides equal coverage, just 44% of journalists said the same, and a little more than half of the journalists surveyed, 55%, say that every side does not always deserve equal coverage in the news. What do you think of this, Kim?
Yeah, I think that there's a real problem that is pervasive inside of the journalism and news industry that needs to be corrected somehow. So we've kind of reeled into this rather than reporting on facts and being more fair and trying to give both sides, even if you favor one side, but at least giving a voice to the other side and saying, well, this is what their position is. We've just kind of reeled into this, no, we're teams. You better not talk to the other side. This is really more pervasive right now, just in the era we're in on the left. Historically, it was more pervasive on the right when they had the more took a more religious tone and said, how dare you talk to those people? That's against God, and this is what the Bible says. And so that's what we have to do. And now the left is kind of taken that sort of same religious tone, but without an actual prescribed religion. Instead, it's this, moral, we don't want to even platform, discuss, talk to those people because they're against our morality, our belief system. Yeah, so that has got to shift.
Platforming, that word, I think about it a lot because I do think that there is a belief, and perhaps this was true in the past when there was a tighter grip on who got to be on TV and who got to be on the media before there were all of these alternative media outlets. But people really do think that entertaining a belief that's held out in the world gives it power that it doesn't already have. The reality is that if people are going to be flat earthers or are going to believe something that isn't true, simply not engaging with those ideas isn't enough anymore because there are so many avenues for people to find the people talking about those issues, read about it, have commentary about it. And if people want to believe it, they're going to believe it. So I think there's a greater responsibility now for journalists to actually engage actively with things, even if they don't think that they are newsworthy or think they're patently false. Because if you want to have public trust, if you're just ignoring an issue, no one's going to believe that you actually have a good argument against that thing. And sure, perhaps that does put more responsibility on journalists, and maybe it takes a lot of energy to be learning about things and responding to things that you might not think are worthwhile, like something like flat earth or something, just to pick perhaps a non-controversial example of something that's not real. But you kind of got to do it, because otherwise in the vacuum, I don't know what to believe about, let's say, COVID and vaccines. I don't know what to believe about a lot of these things, and people don't have the energy to become independent experts in all of these things, and they're really relying on public figures they can trust to, even if they disagree with something, engage with why they disagree with it.
I think it all has a reverse effect. I think that this, the news industry and journalists kind of taking a side and saying, we don't even want to talk to this. I wouldn't even want to give it a platform. We don't even want to discuss it. That's Russian disinformation. I think it has an opposite effect of what they're trying to do, right? So they're trying to get it to where if people aren't exposed to it, then they won't believe it. That's kind of the thinking, the logic behind that. But I think actually what happens is people hear it anyway, and then they think, well, you're not talking about it because you're hiding something from me. So then they're more likely actually to engage in that subject and take it and think, hey, there might be some merit to this because these people that are powerful won't talk about it. I think the same thing happens even in a lot of these, the activist world. I think when activists kind of latch on to a group of people and say, we're going to make you equal, we're going to bring you up in society. And I think actually all it does is it makes it dangerous for that group of people in some ways. I mean, there definitely need to do some everything's a balance. So definitely need to do some activism for certain groups of people that have been marginalized. But when it goes to a level, it gets to a point where it just upsets people. And then they say, you know what, this has gone too far. I can't. And then those people start to be hostile towards that group. It has the opposite effect.
I do think a statement like people should be equal, including this group, that group, or the other, should be a fairly non-controversial one.
Right.
But I do think that there is a way that advocacy, I mean, we talked about this on the show yesterday with the professor who ended up in a back and forth with Josh Hawley about trans rights and trans issues. There is a way that you can make your case that ultimately, I think, hurts the group that you are advocating for. And I said this yesterday again, but I've spoke to trans people on other shows that I have about how they feel they're being represented in the media, and how certain kinds of language and things that they don't necessarily espouse themselves are being held up, often by cis people, as things that people have to comply with language-wise, then go and irritate a whole bunch of other people, and who then focus their antipathy even farther onto trans folks. And we've seen this a little bit with the Latinx conversation as well. I don't think it's the end of the world to say Latinx, especially if you're in some niche academic environment, but you kind of have to have situational situational awareness and know that maybe if you're speaking to a big group in the United States, as the President of the United States of America's wife, that maybe saying, using a term that's not broadly popular and then also comparing people to tacos isn't the best way to go about doing things. But I certainly appreciate your willingness to talk about these issues, Kim.
And we're talking about it on your show soon, right?
Yes, I'm looking forward to chatting tomorrow for a Monday episode of Bad Faith. I'm really, really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm going to go on there and talk about the controversy that was stirred up over comments that when Robbie and I were doing the show with Olaimi about dead naming, we're going to be talking about that controversy, I think, on your show. So I'm excited for that as well.
All right. Well, thank you all, and we'll have more Rising right after this.